right, Greg Medford. Thanks for being here, buddy.
No problem.
Appreciate it, man. It's good to have you here, and you have a lot of history, a lot to talk about. We could probably do this all day, but we've got to consolidate. What I want to discuss first, would you talk a little bit first about just kind of your upbringing, and then lead into your time at Gettysburg College? Because I know nothing personally about that, but it just seems interesting. Knowing who you are now, I feel like that's probably something pretty important in your life. So,
well, it was kind of fluky. So I grew up here in Arizona. I had just a rough and scrabble upbringing, and can I drop the F-bomb here?
Sure, yeah.
I fucking loved my upbringing. Like, people bitch and moan about, my dad whooped my ass. My mom loved me hard, but she was tough too. She'd backhand me if she had to say something 3 times. I was, out till the street lights came on and playing with rattlesnakes and going down in mine shafts and sneaking out with pistols and shooting stuff and lighting stuff on fire and having little campfires and throwing boxes of 22 rounds in them to watch us all duck for cover. I mean, I just had it was an awesome upbringing. It wasn't like Mayberry RFD, like all innocent. It was kind of rough around the edges, and I wouldn't change a goddamn minute of it. It was great. At the time, the Dirty Dozen and the Hells Angels were doing all kinds of stuff north of town where I lived, right on the edge of town, so I would run into them. I had a dirt bike. I was out dirt biking with a gallon gas tank on the back of my camp from like age 7 on. So I was like 7. I can't even imagine this now. I was 8 years old, and I looked like Mad Max. I had a baseball helmet because, my dad's like, put that baseball helmet on. It's good enough. I can have a motorcycle helmet, right? I didn't have a Bell helmet like all the cool kids. I had a little Honda MR50. I had a baseball helmet on with one ear down like this. I'm ripping across the desert with a pair of like bent aviator glasses that were my dad's. Pistol improvisationally put onto the handlebars. And a 1 gallon gas tank on the back because I was going to go till I ran out of gas, fill it up, and come back. And I just was like that all the time. And I found a couple other wild ass range kids, and we just had a great time. It was awesome.
Either your parents loved you or they hated you because you're out all the time and you were the easiest kid, or you were just a nightmare to handle. It's got to be one of those two.
I did dangerous stuff, but I didn't break any laws per se. So I didn't cause any problems. Like, the kids got caught stealing or they got caught in town. The worst thing that could happen is me get caught by an adult and call my dad. That was no good. There was going to be and then that would happen one time, and in the future they'd be like, yeah, you just go ahead and steal. I don't want to have to deal with your dad again. Because my dad he'd be whooping my ass. He'd be walking in with his belt coming out already. So I just had a really kind of rough my dad was with Strategic Air Commander in Vietnam, was building bases up in Newfoundland and other places while we were keeping nukes in the air around the former Soviet Union. He met my mom up in Massachusetts and brought a well-to-do New England trucking family daughter down here to Arizona to live a desert rat lifestyle. Didn't know how to be a dad. He was an alcoholic in AA, and he had been.
Those are the best kind.
Yeah. So my dad, my dad's pretty wonderful. He and I are close. He's kind of just now softened enough to be into everybody else. He's been into himself for years and years and years, and that's how he's kind of stayed functioning. And I always wished he would the energy put into helping all of these other people, he would put into being more of a dad. Now that I've been a dad for 15, 20 years, I'm kind of like 18 years exactly. Now I'm like, okay, I kind of get it. And the bravest thing you do is send your kids off going, okay, I've done my part. Now you have to conquer the world. I can't do it for you. And you let them go. So I'm at that stage right now. They just did that with me when I was like 7. But like, they both, my dad would whoop my ass, and then he would come in and he'd growl at me like a bear and hug me every night and tell me he loved me. And I feel like you can almost fucking do everything wrong. And if you know you're loved, you kind of like let it go and like, okay, I'm loved. Conk out and go to sleep. High school back in Massachusetts.
So how did you get? You went from Arizona to Massachusetts in high school.
So my mom, when he was with Strategic Air Command, ended up. My dad ended up at Westover Air Force Base in Western Massachusetts. Met my mom there in Massachusetts and snagged her and brought her back here. So she got herself a little pretty Southwest. He looked like a movie star, a little blonde, good-looking guy. My grandfather was a fucking he was a hammer. He was a good looking son of a bitch. And like every time I show a girl a picture, they're always like, "Oh my God, can I see a little bit of you? You want to make out?" I'm like, "All right, go ahead." My grandfather, he was a good looking son of a bitch. And so my dad was kind of chip off the old block. And then my mom, she was up there in New England and meets this little tow-haired, fair-skinned, semi-opaque wild guy from Arizona. And she came down here with him, and they made it 8 years. But it was those formative 8 years, you know, when you're a child, that meant so much. And so my dad was a train wreck, and my mom was a kid trying to hold it all together. I mean, they were kids raising kids, you know, they were 22. But they loved me a lot. My dad screwed up, but, I went four-wheeling with him all the time. We went, like, exploring mines. You know, we were, like, kind of broke ass, but we were always doing stuff. So I don't regret that I didn't have a country club lifestyle. I don't regret that we didn't go on upper-class vacations. I spent a lot of time with my dad. It was great fun.
Yeah, just doing stuff.
We were working on airplanes. We restored airplanes together. He had an old 1939 Porterfield, and I remember one of my like rock star moments when I was a child. Is this too much detail?
No, keep going. Yeah, we love it.
My dad had been working on this 1939 Porterfield in our garage over at 32nd Street in Gold Dust, which was the north edge of town. Now it's like in the middle of town, right?
Gold Dust.
Yeah. So we were down 32nd Street in Shea.
Shea, okay.
So 32nd Street in Shea, we were working on this airplane. It's a tail dragger, kind of like a Piper Cub, if you've ever seen one of those. It's kind of like one of those, but cooler. And we'd been working on it a couple of years, and so that's where I started working on metal and working on things. My dad would be like, "All right, sand this thing down. Don't fuck it up or we'll crash and die." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I'm like 7.
Okay, Dad.
You know, so I gotta squeeze those in, but if you crack it, the wing will collapse. You know, so I was really learning how to do really detailed craftsmanship stuff when I was a kid, and then I was so scared of screwing anything up. And my dad, you know, if I screwed anything up, he would like let me know before talking to me. So I got really good at like holding a flashlight for Dad, doing plumbing, working on buildings, and making airplanes. So we were building engines and making airplanes. And when we got the fuselage done, it's time to get that down to the hangar and get the wings in the garage, start working on the wings. We put a gas tank in, pulled it out in the driveway, let the neighbors know. Clear prop, hand started it, and we drove it up and down the street. And I mean, I was a fucking rock star. So I still run into kids every now and then out in town. "Hey, Greg Medford, oh my God, remember that time your dad do the airplane up and down the street?" I was like, "Yes, I do." So it was kind of like that, you know. But God forbid I do normal kid stuff like leave the skateboard out and my dad falls on it while he's got a plate full of steaks. That's a hairy
belt's coming out.
Well, first it's me running down the hallway as fast as I can towards the mirror at the end of the hallway to get into my bedroom before the shit hits the fan. Then it's the skateboard flies by me and sticks into the wall. And then, you know, like I think about that now and I'm like, well, that's some raging ass craziness. But it was the 70s. It seemed kind of normal. I wouldn't trade a minute of it. So my mom, their thing fizzled. My dad's uncharacteristically stayed pretty involved as a dad. I know my mom wished he would have done more, but I went and lived with him. It was great. He was kind of wild and rough around the edges, and I have a knack for remembering the best of things. I have a knack for letting this shit go. People always say, what's the secret of life? You know, you hear wise people talk about the secret of life for me is to carry the best of things and forget about the worst of things. And I know it sounds kind of trite, but it really is. I've had tons of negative shit happen to me, and I just kind of go, I give zero of my energy to the past. And I try to bring the best things forward. So I have the best memories of people who've been a mix of awful and good. And if you focus on the awful, there's a ton of fucking good that happens. Yeah. So I try to stay really optimistic. And, you know, we've talked about our dads a lot. Mm-hmm. I had to work through a lot of stuff to, you know, get to a pretty peaceful point with my dad.
Yeah, well, it's good you did while he's still around.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a blessing for sure.
Yeah. It's the biggest gift he gave me besides just being who he is. The biggest gift he gave me is being accountable and present. So, you know, he whooped my ass. He did stuff to me that was out of line, and he's cried, apologizing. My Dad, enough already, you know, like, I'm okay, man. It's fucking good, man. Let's have lunch, you know. And you've been out with my dad before, right?
I met him one time at your shop.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he's like a teddy bear now. If anyone hears my story, they're like, "Your dad?" I'm like, "Yeah, right after Vietnam, and I was a kid. Yeah, he whooped my ass."
My dad's old school guy like that, and to see him with my kids now, I'm like, dude, what happened to you, man? You used to be so hard,
Teddy
man.
bear
Now
now,
you're
right?
soft. And he's like, whoa, what are you talking about? And I'm like, dude, my daughter walks in. He just melts into this big, like tough looking, like, I'm like, whatever, dude. You were so hard on me, man. But now with her, you're just like, oh, wait, what do you want to do? Oh, you want to, let's have a tea party. I'm like, God.
He never had tea parties.
You guys never had tea parties?
Never had tea parties, unfortunately. But
I'm grateful for it, though. Like, I can't imagine being a soft man. And I know we're in a culture of soft men. And, you know, I wasn't a Navy SEAL. I wasn't anything special. I was an infantry guy in the Marine Corps. But the Marine Corps didn't make me. I was made for the Marine Corps. I was made to be a blunt instrument, kick down doors, be smart, shoot bad guy. Like, I'm wired for that. I just wasn't wired for the discipline to do something at a really high level like you did. Not when I was younger. As I got older, probably way more disciplined, way more regimented. But when I was younger, I was wild. Perfect place for the Marine Corps. You know, blunt instrument, and I could take the gross motor training that happened there, and I could do more with it than most people could. But if you'd asked me to be all professional about it and a cool operator, man, I was the guy you were glad was there, because I was a pain in the ass in every other time, but when it was awful, and then I'm great in those moments. I was like, oh yeah, here we go. Like, kind of happy, and I kind of chilled down, and I was wired for that. But all the hurry up and wait, sitting around, fuck shit that goes on in the military, I was awful at all.
You probably get yourself in trouble.
Oh yeah, I was like, are you kidding me? I'm like, I remember us roughing up our boots, thinking, and I was just like, remember all the times we, Marines polish boots a lot. Okay, how many times have we polished boots? Say, this is really important for discipline. So, the military's full of all these paradoxes and ironies and kind of Napoleonic. It's a lot of vestiges of the Napoleonic military area of the 1840s era, and we're in a modern time. So you've got all of this Napoleonic top-down structure, all of this backwards-ass management and thinking. And maybe you didn't have that at a tier 1 level. I was just in the General Big Green Marine Corps infantry, but it drove me crazy. I was not wired for that. I definitely, if I'd have had more guidance, I would have definitely done something a little more where you can have a beard and be a little more individualistic. I would have been great at that, being a polyglot and getting intel and sneaky killing people. I mean, I was definitely, that would have been probably more now that I know about that. I didn't know about that when I was a kid. That would be more suited to like my personality, but I did what I did, and I had a great time. And again, the Marine Corps was like this. I have wonderful memories of an overall not great experience. It was big government. It's everything I hate.
yeah,
To get you back, my mom was from Massachusetts. So when my family kind of disintegrated in 78, 79, my mom was out here, single mom, working, waiting tables. And then she was a dispatcher in the plumbing business. I went from there to, she wanted me to go to a good school, and Arizona schools were kind of 49th out of 50 in those days, and still are in a lot of ways. Not where we were in Paradise Valley. Those were always the best schools in town, but I showed up, went to Massachusetts, and, I had Latin and ancient Greek in my regular daily activity, and I'm grateful. The high school education I got in Western Massachusetts was fucking legit.
And so that's how you ended up at Gettysburg College.
That's how I ended up back east, yeah.
So tell us about that a little bit. And like, I did a little research on that. It seems like it's a pretty patriotic place. So I'm guessing you went there because of that, but maybe not. Maybe that made you. Fluke.
Yeah, I can't see Gettysburg College being a liberal type.
It's not a liberal bastion at all. So I ended up back in New England going to high school. I'm living with my uncle at the time. And then my mom finally, she moved back there and we built a family there around my grandparents. But we have a 120-year-old trucking company. So third generation running the company. So I was around the trucking business. So whenever, I didn't need to go get a part-time job, I would, go down and I would snow plow on roofs at night in snowstorms, snow off the tops of trailers if that needed to be, like whatever anybody needed, breaking up pallets, sweeping a dock. I was around to help, or a lot of snow plowing. And then college happened, and high school, I remember I had these liberal teachers in high school. They were really good, though. One of my favorites, Jake Mahegan. He was a painter in his part-time, political science teacher. He went to Boston Public, which is like the best high school in the United States. And he had this Boston accent that would fucking grind your skin off your bones. And he was just the most left and right. Of course, the fucking right is stupid on this, but here's what they think, and here's why they think it. Like you knew he was a lib, and he knew I was not, and he loved me because I would argue, my case pretty well, and he's like, fucking Greggy. But there was this great kind of a Socratic education. So they would, concept is given, some perspectives. Now, what's your view, and defend yourself and why? So that was still going on. So even with libtards at the helm, they were still being like, hey, it's our responsibility to show both. And what was great is the arrogance of the day was, we're right, but we're so confident in us being right, we're happy to show you the other side. But now they're right. They don't know what the other side is. They don't even know they're wrong when they're wrong. And I don't even know what the conversation is. But great education. I decided I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I'd met this old guy, Ash, who had a Citabria out at Barnes Air Force Base. And I would take my horse and I would ride over the Air Force Base. I would tie my horse up on the fence and I would scuttle across the grass. And he had a hangar there with a V35 Bonanza, a single seat, I think an S1B Pitts, and a Super Decathlon. And he would throw me in the back of the Decathlon. He's like, well, we should check with your parents. I go, nah, they don't care. Then he's like, oh, okay, old timer. He's like, oh, your parents don't care? Okay, that's good enough for me. We'd hop in the airplane. He'd let me fly, and we'd go fly and land in grass fields all over New England. We just had a great time. So I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and looked at looked at the military, and basically I went, talked to the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps just fit my attitude and the highest amount of combative aircraft. I'm not going to get stuck flying a bus. You're a snob when you're thinking you want to be a pilot. Oh, I don't want to fly a B-52. That's fucking gay. I want to be a fighter pilot. Oh, I don't want to fly a chopper. That's gay. I want to fly jets. Yeah. You got all these, and afterwards you're like, oh man, I would have been a chopper pilot. I had a great time doing that. Grease on your uniform, down in the weeds, blowing up bad guys. Fantastic. Fighter pilots haven't done anything meaningful in fucking 4 decades. So, sorry, fighter pilots. Thanks for all the cap. So you just you have this thing, and you kind of have to pick the end, and you don't know any idea how to get there. The Marine Corps, they said, no, if you do this, you can become an officer. And I did PLCs, which is platoon leaders course we have in the Marine Corps. It's a way you do OCS in 2 summers of college, and then you get commissioned when you graduate. I enlisted in the Marine Corps because I was like, well, I don't want to be just some goddamn zero. I'll be enlisted first. Such an asshole.
So you were planning on staying in forever. You're going enlisted.
I enlisted because I knew if I enlisted and if I got lucky, there would be a conflict and I'd go get to do something on the ground and kind of know that universe, because pilots are a little insulated from that universe. They have air conditioning, for fuck's sake. They're always at a base and usually someplace safe because the equipment's worth, $250 million or whatever. So, and the infantry is totally different, man. They'll stick you right up on the edge of no man's land, and you guys put up a triangular perimeter and a CP hooch, and you're good.
Yeah, you're not worth anything. You're very low value.
Airplanes, no, we keep those 200 miles back, and they have 4 of you guys around them blocking them. So I decided to go in the Marine Corps, and they didn't care where I went to school. So I joined the Marine Corps while I was in high school. I did not walk for graduation in high school. I graduated, but I didn't walk because I had to leave like the day I finished classes. I went to boot camp, Parris Island, became a Marine. And then I got back, drilled in an infantry unit, 1st Battalion, 25th Marines up in New England. And then as I was going to college, I got into the officer selection program and started doing PLCs in the summers there. So I was a UMass student for engineering at the time. And then life comes along and throws curveballs at you. And I was not, really in the military, you have to be like a willow tree. You have to be willing to bend completely to the will of what they want. There's no bucking the system. I think that's probably like one of the great advantages of getting in a tier 1 unit. You can kind of stay there and be a part of that the rest of your career. The Marine Corps is not like that. You can be a pilot. Next thing you know, you're a FAC, and then you do a third tour as a fact, then you have to do a Pentagon tour, and then after that you have to do this and you have to do that, and you don't get to do your job very much. So that whole lifestyle was never going to be my lifestyle. But Gulf War popped up. The unit that I was training with, without pay, was getting activated because of politics. I don't know. You can rewind the time. It's a bunch of stuff you don't need to know or talk or listeners don't care about. But there was a bunch of Congress was questioning the money that was being spent on reservists at the time. And at the time, I believe the commandant of the Marine Corps was a guy named A.M. Gray. It was either Gray or Monday. I can't remember which. But he was like, he goes before Congress and says, nope, don't take away funding for the Marines. The Marine Corps reserve units, infantry units will fight with our frontline units. They're combat ready right now. And then the Gulf War happened like a month after he said that. And he sent 1st Battalion 25th Marines attached to the 5th Marines out of Southern California as like first reserve unit to get deployed and go since World War II. And we integrated with the 5th Marines. So my unit's going, they're below, I think these are called TO strength or whatever. They were below strength. I called them up on Thanksgiving. I was like, hey, do you guys need, like, yep, Medford. So I had to withdraw from the officer program, kick my enlisted contract back alive, and I deployed with him. Best thing I ever did. Total fun.
How long were you there?
7 months.
Dang.
Yeah, it's kind of a normal. Marine Corps seems to like 7 month rotations.
Yeah.
Even in these last couple of wars, I think 7 months was their deal. So did that.
Anything cool happen while you're over there?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to even think about. Like, yeah, I had some cool stuff happen. It wasn't a protracted conflict like the last 20 years has been. It was a really quick thing, and it was a hybrid kind of war. So there was, I walked through the largest tank battle that's ever taken place. I just walked through it. I remember a line of choppers to the left and right as far as I could see in both directions carrying guys forward. Walking through minefields. Like, I don't think anybody's walked through a minefield since the Gulf War. I mean, there aren't minefields in Afghanistan and Iraq, are there?
I wouldn't call them minefields.
Like the whole theater's a minefield of IEDs.
No.
But imagine walking through a minefield where, because of the shifting sands and the winds of the last week, you can see the side of mines laid out every 8 feet as far as you can see left and right and out in front. And you got to walk through them all.
It's insane.
Like, it's kind of bizarre. And then they say, oh, there's these little Italian mines mixed in. You might not be able to see. They'll just castrate you and debilitate you. And we're like,
sick. I'm in.
Okay. Yeah. So, you infantry guys, we just follow up behind a tank, and the tank shoots this piece of det cord out a few hundred yards, blows a channel 20 feet wide. And of course, don't ever funnel. And we all funnel and run through the channel. And then we're running up on bunkers that are all firing. And, it's it's kind of it was very World War II feeling to me. Yeah. It wasn't like if I watch World War II film, that looks like my conflict. Yeah. And the Afghanistan conflict, to me, it's like something completely different.
Well, we'll get into World War II in a little bit because I want to talk to you about that too.
Okay. So anyways, I had a great time in the Marine Corps. It was wonderful. I met some great guys. I'm still friends with, several of them. I had one of them come out. We haven't seen each other in 30 years. He came out, helped me put all new electrical in my house.
Wow.
Yeah. He didn't want to go chase girls. He didn't want to go drink. I mean, we hung out in the house and then barbecued at night. And it was like an awesome 3 days hanging out with one of my old squad leader. It was awesome. He was a fire team leader, but it was just awesome. So I get back from there. Still, I'm kind of rough around the edges. And then I was looking at up in my game school-wise, and the girl that I was kind of seriously dating at the time, she got a job down in Washington, D.C. in Crystal City, and I wanted to get someplace that was like reasonable driving distance. So I ended up looking at Gettysburg, and then I ended up getting this scholarship that had been kicking around since like the Civil War. And they were like, "Oh, you qualify for this." I was like, "Oh, okay." And they kicked a bunch of money up, and I had a little bit to pay them. And it was this bucolic kind of southern, just beautiful campus. big trees and old buildings and red brick and white pillars, and it was really, really nice. And joined a fraternity and played music, did a radio show, and I had a great time. It was.
So you were in the Marine Corps and in and out of college and in and out of the Marine Corps kind of all at the same time.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And then what happened was there was a bunch of drawdown that was going down, which opened some big windows to get off the train at that time. So Clinton was president after the Gulf War, if I have this right. I think it was Clinton. And at that time, they were, casual status for pilots waiting for flight school slots had gone up to like 38 months or 42 months. So, you finish the basic school, go to OCS, go to 6 months of the basic school, do basically squad level infantry tactics and close air support. Then from there, you go out to your specialty school. Well, if you're going to be an aviator, they pop you in casual status and you just go be some fucking admin puke for somebody waiting for your slot to open up. And when they start talking 3 years of casual status, I'm like, get me out of here.
Mm-hmm. No thanks.
Yeah. But, I should have done it and gone and flown F-18s for a while because it would have been those would have been some great pictures for my wall, but, oh well. Yeah, so got out of the Marine Corps after 4 years. Ended up down at Gettysburg. I got kicked out of Gettysburg with one class left. Yeah, prank phone calls. That'll get you kicked out. And it was the precursor to political correctness. The college administration was embarrassed for kicking me out as they were kicking me out and telling me, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, come back next semester. We're really sorry.
Did you?
No. I came out west. We actually threw darts on a map until we hit a city I wanted to go to, and I drove to New Orleans. It was the last day of Mardi Gras. And I got arrested in Mardi Gras. And the judge, after I spent all of my Go West Be a Comedian in LA money, I spent all that money to stay out of jail, pay for some damage. And then they drove me to the border of Louisiana.
This still sounds like a Marine Corps story.
So I'm telling you, the Marine Corps I wasn't ready for the world. And so I got out of Louisiana. They escorted me to the state line and said, "Bye-bye, Yankee."
West?
Yeah.
So what, Texas?
Well,
Texas
at the west, at the Texas border, yeah.
Texas border.
Yeah.
So then what?
I was headed to LA to do comedy, and I was stopped here in Phoenix. My dad was here at the time. He was divorced, and I stopped at a Burger King, and it was not far from here actually. And I ran into two guys that I used to fight with when I did martial arts when I was a kid, and they said, "Oh, you ought to come by Dennis's place." It was my old first martial arts instructor. So I went by, and he said, "Well, if you don't have enough money to go to LA, why don't you work here for a while?" And I worked for him, and then I opened up a couple of schools of my own, and kind of stayed and did that for a while. I didn't make it to LA because I was kind of out of money.
So, of all things you wanted to do after the Marine Corps, after wanting to be a pilot, then comedy. That seems like kind of out in right field.
I got a lot going on. My brain operates at a pretty fast speed. You've not known me too much before I had a little heart thing where I had a procedure to look inside my heart, and it knocked some stuff loose that went into my brain and slowed my speech down. But pretty fast talking, my brain's always
You were
operating.
faster than you are now?
Yeah, way faster, which was actually good for stand-up because my stand-up I did after that was much better because I just slowed down and enjoyed the ride a little bit more. Yeah, it was almost like Robin Williams fast, kind of like almost manic. So I've learned how to slow down just so my brain can keep up with me. So anyway, ended up, Gettysburg was awesome. Got out here, opened up my own school. At the end of the year, the first year, I had met my to-be wife, Amy. And at that time, I met her family, and they were all lovely folks. And everybody went to college, and Dad was a Fortune 500 CEO, retired. And I said, well, geez, she can't be married to some scrub ex-Marine. I better I better go back and finish my degree. So I remember this phone call vividly because this is before the years of cell phones and everything. I dial up. I call the registrar at Gettysburg, and the phone answers, and I recognize the voice. It was the dean of students, a guy named Ron Couchman, been there since the 60s. Greg Medford, is that you? And it was before caller ID. He could only see my number. And I go, Ron, how in the hell did you know it's me? Actually, I said Dean Couchman. And he goes, well, I've been thinking about you a lot. And this was years later, okay? The universe has got serendipity to it. And he goes, I was just hoping you would get your degree. You were just one class short. And I said, so he said, go to ASU. He goes, I'll let you transfer the credit in. And that's how I finished up. I had to take a fourth-year German class 10 years after college to graduate.
And you passed it, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, cute instructor. And I finished I had to go to, I was a philosophy major, so you had to defend a thesis with them. So I wrote a thesis and went and I did a Socratic dialogue and then went back and presented it.
Well, let's jump forward a little bit.
Yeah.
To
this is some boring shit.
Really,
right here,
really where you and I met.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
boring. Yeah. Look, Steve's falling asleep. Sorry.
But really where you and I met, which is a George Washington event that you put on.
Yeah.
And I'm interested to really understand, how you got interested in that topic and why George Washington. And obviously that's America. And obviously you're a patriot and an American. And I'm just interested to understand, how that developed for you. And, I'd also, if you have some knowledge about George Washington and the founders, I'd love to hear it.
If you think about a crime scene and you look at like the bullet hole in a wall, where the person fell, how tall they are, where the bullet came from, and you put thread up, there's this moment in time you're looking at, but all of these other things can tell you about it. The threads that led to this moment of me kind of becoming the patriotic creature that I am was hundreds of times seeing my immigrant grandfather from Greece get teary-eyed and pull out his handkerchief to wipe his eyes as he told his story about coming to America and how America welcomed him in. And it was a land of opportunity and the proudest day of his life in the 1950s when he became an American citizen, 45 years after coming here. Those repeated stories, the reverence that was shown to him because of his success and his kindness and his generosity by everywhere we went. And then hearing the stories about, my Uncle Pat, who died flying over Germany, my dad, who had served in the Air Force, my grandfather, who'd been in the U.S. Cavalry, my uncle, who had been in the cavalry, like all of those things. And then the men that they were friends with, my dad's friends from Vietnam, from the Air Force, who had just gotten back from Vietnam, and they were like stopping to see my dad before going home to their families in the early 1970s and after, coming and staying at the house and spending time with me while I was like, those were all pretty formative. So then being around Massachusetts and Boston, loving history, my mom being an antique dealer, all of those things crash into this like love and appreciation for history. And then as I kind of just became politically aware and I think about this enterprise of us governing ourselves, and I don't think you can appreciate it. And it's the law of relativity until you see it not being done. And then you go, oh, so everyone thinks Europe is this sophisticated, wonderful place because of its age and its culture. And I think Europe is a backwards ass, ring in the toilet bowl shithole of neat buildings made by religious figures who robbed the masses. That's what Europe feels like to me. They're a bunch of broke dicks over there. They haven't had a good goddamn idea in forever, except for CERN. I don't know why we didn't build CERN here. We were supposed to build that in the Midwest. Like, the only thing good to come out of Europe is us.
Fuck America. I love it.
Yeah. The best thing Europe ever did is America. And what we did is say, we had awful parents. We're not going to do it that way. And that's what we are here. And I was sitting around, I was in business in Germany. I was doing business in Germany. I was sitting around a table of Germans, and they were all really nice. And I'd been doing business in German for a couple of days. So like my brain was swimming. So I was kind of checked out, and they were having this deep political discussion about, the arrogance of Americans while I'm there.
Yeah.
And I don't care, and they were like, Greg, you're not, about this stuff. And because they were saying normally people are arrogant and don't know they've listened to my podcast or, listen to my videos. Like, and they're diehard conservatives in Germany, like there are in California, who feel like they're strangers in their own land. That's the way Europe is. 30% of Europe's just like us. They're badass right wing, get it done kind of, and they're in a sea of 70% of beta ding dongs, letting the government run the goddamn show. So they're talking about this, and they were asking, why do you think it is? And I said, well, I'll tell you what's different. I said, I'm different than all you guys. And they go, we know. What's the deal? And I said, well, you have all been granted your freedom by somebody. We told the only world superpower to fuck off and then sent the king home with a bruise in his eye. We're different. We took it from everybody. I said, we're different than, we're different than everybody. There's problems in every community that's been granted its freedom. The real blight of slavery in this country, slavery is awful, dumb institution that existed globally forever, always, in all human history.
Still does today.
Yeah, until 250,000 of us killed each other getting rid of it. We're the only group of citizens who've ever rejected slavery, ever on planet Earth, ever. And we get black eyes for killing 250,000 of each other to get rid of the institution. Sure, one side wanted, one that didn't. We all fought over it, and we won, and the dust settled where it did. No king came in and said, oh, we've got the cotton gin. We don't need to do that anymore. If it wasn't for the cotton gin, there probably would still be some kind of slavery. And there is still slavery everywhere. My point is, there's problems in every community that's granted its freedom. What would have happened if the Jews of Nazi Germany, I've walked those camps. Have you been to Dachau or have you been to a concentration camp? I went to a concentration camp. Now, lots of people have done it. It's not a big deal. But when you walk it, you would be very familiar. Were you military as well?
I was not.
Okay. It'd be very familiar to you. It has a military camp feel to it. Rows of barracks, a processing area, a parade area, so where you muster every day. It had a very, except for the little, place to deal with all the dead bodies in the back, the crematoria. The place has a very familiar feel to it. And I'm a Germanophile. I love German stuff in Germany. I like Germany a lot, and I can kind of crank through the language. I was mad at Germany for 2 years after going through it. Because one, it was right on the edge of a town. They knew what was happening, first of all. And so it wasn't like, oh, it was out in the woods. We didn't know. No, you knew. You were bringing milk here, you sons of bitches. Yeah. And the second thing is I was mad at Jews. Because I was like, how do 40 people hold you in this little camp, 10,000 of you? How is that possible? Because I'm thinking of them holding 10,000 people like me, fucking possible. You'd have to machine gun me.
Well, a lot of people did escape. Now, this concentration camps all over Eastern Europe, so especially the ones in Russia, people escaped all the time, but they had nowhere to go.
Right.
They were literally froze to death.
Right.
So they stayed.
But why is it 40 guys who are on, a third of whom are sleeping at any given moment can keep 10,000 people prisoner?
Mindset.
Mindset. Mindset. So I think there are challenges in every community that gets liberated and doesn't take its freedom of its own accord. And I think if we look around the planet and we look at nations, and I know this is touchy stuff and makes people like squish, makes people squirm to hear. I think there's something about the human condition, just like giving a kid a really nice car for their first car. They don't treat it with respect. They don't get it. They'll beat on it. They'll curb it. They'll blah, blah, blah. Make them pay for their car and see how they act with their car. And it's just like freedom. When you take your freedom and you earn your freedom, you treat it like something you earned. And that's what makes, now look, I didn't fight in the Civil War. I didn't fight in the Revolutionary War. But there's a collective it's inescapable. My people have been here since 1780s and the 1840s is when kind of both sides of my lineage got here. We've been paying the grist mill, and that collectively gets passed down. I believe that's at a cellular level, we hold on to our generational lessons and our pains, because there's no reason why the black community in the United States is griping over slavery if they don't have a collective poison from it still in their blood. I get it. I'm not pshawing it. I'm not belittling it. There is something different about those who liberate themselves. And
well, the Jews, they had been wandering the earth for ages and ages at that point. They didn't have any, I don't think they had any cohesiveness to their culture, where the Americans, we still, at least the conservatives, from what I can tell, we still have that spirit of George Washington. We still, 250 years later, we still have that spirit. And that culture that just goes from generation to generation matters. And I don't know exactly what was going on in that Jewish culture to make them not want to liberate themselves. 10,000 people being jailed by 40 guards, but maybe there was something about they didn't have that any history of liberation.
Yeah. Well, I know it's a touchy subject, and I know I could be lambasted for almost anything you say about this, but matriarchal cultures that lack masculinity, it's easy to do this stuff too. It's easy to imprison mass groups of people who are matriarchal. It's not nice, but it's true.
Most, I feel like, could be taken advantage of. Most cultures can and have been.
All cultures can be. It is very hard to take care of masculine. It is very hard to dominate masculine cultures.
And that's why I think at least the American right has something above and beyond. I've thought about this a lot. Something that nowhere else in the world has. That we have something that has trickled down through 10 generations from our founders that's still here.
You goddamn right.
Yeah, that's why we had talked about this in another time. It's like, toxic masculinity. Well, you're fucking welcome. World War II, World War I. Those are all products of a bunch of toxic men came in and said, "Nah, dude," and they kicked down the door and said, "We've
got toxic capitalism, which gets us in these goddamn conflicts in the first place, right? There hasn't been really very many just wars, okay? Right. But all wars that at some point or another, because of idiots at the top, all wars end up getting won or lost by masculine creatures. The reason they want to take away our guns, the reason political correctness exists is because you cannot dominate masculine-led families. You cannot dominate masculine-led culture. You cannot dominate masculine families who also connect to God. And the reason why I say this, and I'm not a God believer, I'm a kind of neutral party in that. I got no dog in that fight. But people who at least believe in that and are tethered to that, the reason they are so anti-God is because it gets right back to these inalienable human rights endowed upon us from the Creator with no middleman. And we don't need a priest making the sign of the cross blessing us. No, thanks very much. God and I are on a one-on-one. And when you do that, it de-arms, it defangs the power around you because it's illusory. They don't really have power. And what they want to do is they want to get rid of all of us who say no. That way they can just dominate the culture. But all of us, most of us are, most of the toxic masculinity, the toxic masculinity, they confuse. And it's just like everything else. When you poll women, let's take any topic that becomes a political issue, poll women on abortion, and there's no one watching, they're almost 100% pro-abortion. They are all pro-choice. Ask them if they would have one, that number goes way down. Say, maybe it's 30% instead of, I'm not kidding, it's like 85 or 90% of women when polled blindly are pro-choice. How many of them would actually have one? It's way less. But then you look at the movement, and the movement around that is crazy because they believe in ripping a baby out a day before it's born. I mean, it's bananas. Any anything that gets co-opted by the body politic gets morphed into something that's not true. So what we don't want is a culture of rape. That's bad for our women and our daughters. And I'm not part of that culture. And I don't know anybody who is, but I'm sure I know guys who've gone too far and crossed the line at one point or the other. But my point is, masculinity is the backbone of this country. Yes, women have been part of building the country. Yes, absolutely. Wouldn't be here without women. But we wouldn't have lights, railroads, cars, airplanes, ports, houses, toasters, TVs. There wouldn't even be the tampon. Everything has been done, made for, supported. There'd be garbage piled up everywhere. Masculine cultures are the only ones that can survive and survive well. Feminine cultures crush the individual for the group, and they're not successful.
How do masculine cultures stay masculine and don't cross into this what you kind of described as rape or these guys crossing the line and doing things that they shouldn't do? Now that's what our people in our culture are saying is toxic masculinity,
right.
but it's really
they merge. This is what I was saying.
Yeah.
They say, look, a woman's men's right to bear arms is the equivalent to women's right to choice. They're equivalency gender issues. You know, when someone says, hey, well, Greg, we just need sensible gun laws. I'm like, hey, fuck you and fuck your sensible. And I don't even care. I will fucking kill anybody who wants to come take them. Fuck off. I'm not even in gun culture. Women are the same way about abortion. And if conservatives don't see that, we kind of miss the boat. They don't all want to go out and have babies ripped out of their wombs, but they don't want anybody, the government, impeding their ability to determine their own. There are a lot of decisions that women make. There are fear-based processes and decisions. Is he going to stay? Is this a good man to have a baby with? This traps me with this guy forever. Was it a onesie? Was it a twosie? Is it my husband? They make a lot of qualifying decisions that we don't hardly ever make. Every woman who has to think about that, and then she's tethered to this creature. We're not. So, yes, it is my business. Personally, I'm not in support of abortion, and I'm 100% in support of choice. And until Republicans get their heads out of their ass on that issue, we're a bunch of dummies who've been pushed into the corner by born-again kooky Christian types. Public policy and religion do not overlap very well. Until a politician wins with 98% of the vote, they have to fucking take everybody into their decision. It's for all of us. So when Carrie Lake says, and I like Carrie, and I like her better than any of the options on the Democrat ticket, when she says no abortion in all cases, including rape and incest, I just watched her lose 10, 20, 10, 15, impossible to win. 1 in 4 women are assaulted in this country, still 1 in 4. That means 25% of all women have had sexual things happen they didn't approve of. That means 1 in 4 women, regardless of their politics, that's 1 in 4 Republicans also, regardless of their politics, are going to be pro-choice because they don't want to get stuck with something that happened out of an assault. And until we get to the point where we can say, listen, I am, and I'll make a quote up. I always wanted Carrie to say this. I am a Christian. I do not support it. I would never have that in my family. But if elected in the state of Arizona, until I win with 98.6% of the vote, and it's in the normal realm of 5% of 50-50, then I have to look at any good legislation that protects and balances the sanctity of life and a woman's right to self-determinism. I have to get on board with that legislation, even if my strong Christian friends with tunnel view don't approve, and even if that seems a little restrictive for those of you who would kill a baby a week before it's born. There is good public policy in the middle. If she said that, she'd be our governor right now.
Don't you think, though, it's a slippery slope to figure out when life starts and then just say we can kill anything before that? It seems to me like we don't want to get in the business of killing humans. That is not a good business. And so I think that's where this challenge is. One of the challenges of the whole abortion debate, because whether you're at 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, it's still a living potential organism that we should not probably be exterminating that's the argument, right?
Well, that's the slippery slope, right? Like if you're really worried about saving life, get rid of all the aisles in the middle of a grocery store. Like if you're really serious, stop subsidizing sugar and corn.
Every issue we have nowadays can be solved by other things way back down the stream.
There are much bigger things to worry about than this, okay? And what this is a heartstring thing to tug and divide us. And the truth is, when you poll Republican women without their husband present seeing their vote, they are very, very pro-choice. And that is because as Americans, back to George Washington, if you look at our founding documents, if you read the Federalist Papers, they are enshrining individual liberty. They are not enshrining the sanctity of life. They are not enshrining religion. They are not enshrining your morality being pushed on anyone else. They're enshrining your ability to be self-determinant. It's Locke and Hume and Descartes and Montesquieu. Those Enlightenment philosophers are being embodied by our founding fathers with this new idea that the group, you can do as you like as long as you don't impose on me. That's enshrined more than anything.
But we have, I don't want to beat this too much, but we have laws. One of the most important laws and obvious laws we have is do not murder, right? Thou shall not murder. So where do we, to me, it's from a woman's right to murder. I mean, that's the extremes we're playing with here. So
it is. And I'm okay with a little murder. And the reason I'm okay with a little murder, as awful as it sounds, is because my gravitas for freedom is greater than my gravitas for sanctity of life. And I hate to sound so cavalier about it. I'm a well thought out guy, but you have to, if you are pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment, you're okay with the death and mayhem that freedom causes in this country, and I am okay with it. Look, school shootings, awful. Murder, awful. I like freedom more. Fuck off. Move to Sweden. It's safe over there. Fuck off. But you got to be consistent. If you're okay with innocence being blamed in the Second Amendment side of the universe, because that is actually enshrined in the Constitution, then you got to be okay with the mess that happens on the gender side of it, because there's nowhere in there. There's not two sentences valuing the sanctity of life in the Constitution. Well, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yeah. There's one thing.
I think kind of some confusion comes in when pro-choice, I would just say mostly Democrats because they're pushing that. Not
Excuse me.
To your point, I would agree with, but so on the Democratic side, they're pushing this as well. My body, my choice. Well, I seem to remember an incident that happened 4 years ago where they were like, hey man, get this vaccine. Well, now my body, my choice, right? No. And then we talked about this too, where, okay, so I get drunk, tanked up one night, I get in a car wreck, I kill a pregnant mother, I get 2 murder charges. Democrats are totally cool with that. They're cool with the 2 murder charges, but then on the other hand, it's like, well, as long as I choose to murder it, that's cool. If you choose to murder it, fuck you, you're going to jail. So
that's why I won't get into the weeds. I won't get into the weeds on, heartbeat at 7 weeks, viability at 22 weeks. I mean, I get that stuff. I won't get into the weeds because that is an argument that when we get into that minutia, it is unwinnable. But they want us all. They want women thinking this whole side hates them. That's not the case. And it's about stealing votes. The issue has been caged for voting. And they want us all arguing the nuance because we'll never be able to resolve the nuance. There is no nuance that works. That's why I go back to the core argument. Why is it you're okay with firearms death all over America and not okay with abortion? And I'm not putting you on the spot.
Oh, that's a question. That's a hypothetical, or is that an actual question?
Why are we so damn okay? I'm asking us conservatives who are pro-choice. Why are and then why? And I ask a liberal, why are you so damn worked about gun deaths when you've killed 1 billion people since 1973?
Well, I never looked at it as much as I have now from a perspective of freedom. I always thought about it as like, yes, I think life is important. I don't think there's anything more important than we can do is value life itself.
Yeah.
And yes, obviously pro Second Amendment, but what I'm doing with my Second Amendment is hopefully trying to protect myself. Like there's a difference between protecting yourself and killing someone in self-defense rather than intentionally killing someone, whether it's a 3-month-old fetus or, you know, a 60-year-old.
I hear your logic, but I think you've made the opposite decision in most of the things in your universe. Life is not the most important. Because if we're really honest with ourselves, if life is the most important, we'd get rid of cars and we'd get rid of sugar, we'd get rid of the corn. Life is not the most important.
There's nothing we can do about, well, I shouldn't say that. We can't immediately do anything about that. That is an institutional issue. Like we're stuck with the groceries on the grocery store floor.
It's the same as the abortion thing, though. We're trying to pass we're trying to pass a state law of some kind to codify some sort of public policy. It's the same thing as that. If we're really, most of us, we've rationalized. If life is truly, really life is not the most important paradigm.
Well,
freedom is.
I think with abortion, it's like so immediate and definite. With food, it's this gradual, it may happen, it may not. You may get over, you know, all these little nuances about food and about all these other things. With abortion, it's like the one main point is to kill. That's the only point of abortion.
But it's not. That's actually not.
Well,
it's the outcome. Okay. The main point is self-determinism. If we can get past the judgment, there's some young woman or her family and her, or her man and her deciding for whatever reason, we can't get into their hearts and their souls, that they can't do it.
So you think that's sides on the more freedom, the freedom of the individial.
Yeah.
To be able to do that.
That's the paradigm through which I try to crush everything.
Yeah. Well, you need that. I mean, it is a struggle for a lot of people. Me too. I try to look at things through a paradigm of freedom, but then I'm a Christian, so I look at things through that paradigm too. And sometimes they do conflict.
Yeah. I try to have my unified world theory about how I approach looking at the universe. Mm-hmm. I try to have that supersede everything. And then if I need to make a change to my view, that way I am consistent. I will not be rocked. If my ethos needs to shift, nudge me. But it ain't going to be 4 arguments down the line. Let's get back to what the core thing is. If I get to the core thing on firearms, we're not all out shooting people. Why are we so crazy about having the guns? We're out of our goddamn minds. Our argument for guns,
because we know history.
Our argument for guns is irrational.
Why?
You see everybody? Everyone says, it's not irrational. But why? Because fuck this guy. Who brought this Democrat here? No, our argument for guns is irrational. And that is how they see it, because they're looking at your argument for abortion and seeing it as irrational as well. Our argument for guns is getting back to core principles. What's our argument for guns? Because we are the counterbalance to totalitarianism. It's not about protecting my house. We didn't need to say that in 1783. There was no cop to call. There was no phone. You had to protect your house. That was assumed. Everyone says, it's the right to protection. It's not the right to protection. It's for hunting. It's never about that. Yeah. It was a group of people who had just gone at it with a superpower, wrote a constitution, and nobody would sign it. Unless they put this thing together called the Bill of Rights. The first one was you can say the truth and you can gather to pray. The second one is the right to keep and bear arms. Then the third, fourth, fifth, it wasn't the 8th Amendment. It was like, no one's going to sign this if we don't have these 2 things. The most important thing is, or the reason we carry firearms is to limit totalitarianism. And if all of those Germans would have had guns and been a little bit more gangster and a little bit more godly, they might not have let a political group round up 12 million, not just 6 million Jews, and 12 million political enemies, gypsies, dissidents, and retarded people, and push them all into ovens. Masculine guys with guns who take their morals from a higher authority than some fucking elected shill. Mm-hmm. So that's the way I feel about abortion too.
Well, I'm glad that you said that, because I've never thought about it that way. Personally, I look at it this way. I have my personal beliefs and then there's my political beliefs. And those two, sometimes they overlap well, sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
That's the way I've looked at it, because there are conflicts.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And to be able to meld those two into one one idea is difficult. And that, to me, when I look at the future, going, well, I think my personal beliefs are the right way to live, but I think my political beliefs veer from that slightly because I value freedom. Those two actually end up contradicting to some degree, and I wonder how we can ever survive.
Well, our view of the body politic has to be a wider swath than our personal path. And our personal path, we have to know there are going to be a spectrum of people who behave in a more just, chaste, unjust, immoral manner within our group as a people. And we have to find a way to not criminalize people who are not outside of our narrow path, because we all walk a path that has 2 feet on it. And it's really narrow. And I've found that I have to find a way to have, if I get back to core principles and I don't get fixated on the things I have distaste for, it keeps me real consistent. The act of abortion itself is highly distasteful to me. So is the act of taking away guns.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Let's move a little bit farther ahead in time. Sure. I know we last left off with kind of George Washington. We've been all over the place. No, it's okay. But I really think America today is so, our history and what we've been through, Civil War, World War II specifically, has really developed America to who it is. And I'm not a liberal, so I don't know, but I know conservative culture, gun culture, is still, to me, it feels like, from what I know about the founders, it's just pulled through time into us still. And how has, I'm curious to know, because you have such deep knowledge about the wars of American history, but specifically World War II. How has that affected us today? That's a broad question, but you can start anywhere, and I'm sure we'll dig in.
I don't know. I've not thought about, there's a lot of negative. Let me go back to the Constitution for a minute, okay? So the Constitution is a unique document. It's not a living document like liberals like to say it is. It is just like truth. Truth is not a living thing. Truth is or is not, right? Or it's just an opinion. And I think about it like it's a ship. So the Constitution is meant to be a keel. What does a keel do? It stabilizes the boat to cut truth through the water. And a ship, a sailing vessel, it has all these different forces on it, currents sliding it left and right, pushing against it as it goes forward, sometimes pushing it forward as it goes forward. All these winds, storms, and the winds and the storms are politics. And the currents are changing times. And a country with 330 million people in it that's gone a quarter millennia now, one of the longest surviving governments contiguously on planet Earth, actually. How does it get from there to here, and how does it get from here to the new place? And it's because of the keel. The keel can't change. And the keel is our Constitution, right? It reaches out into the future. It's saying that we won't make these compromises. So as things go by, it's the steadier, so that we don't tack this way with the sexual revolution, and we don't tack this way with social conservatism. We don't tack this way with abortion, and tack this way with criminalizing marijuana. You can't run a country that's all over the goddamn place. So the Constitution kind of creates this keel, and the Supreme Court is this kind of arbiter of the keel. It decides, is this where the keel's actually pointing right now? And every now and then they make a crazy aberrant decision, and Roe v. Wade happens. Not because of the subject matter, but because it undermines the Constitution and the authority of the state versus the federal government. If we look at these wars that have happened, World War II was the greatest buildup of mechanization, industrialization, and building that's ever happened. And it's still steering us today as we're trying to keep factories busy. We built all these factories to make B-17s and B-29s, B-24s and B-25s and Sherman tanks on and on and on and on. And when the war ended, they got to find a way to keep all these people in these factories going. So there's a little bit of that, you know, and that's where we hear the military industrial complex is really born in World War II. It was really the perverse turn of, we are all capitalists because we believe in supply and demand, and that a free market of crafty people trying to hustle for their family will react most nimbly to the needs of the marketplace to provide the best idea. And two guys will come up with ideas and compete, and whoever's better will win, and it'll serve the customer best. So the marketplace of ideas, right? And in the middle of that, throw an economy. So within our greater economy, there is a military economy. And you now have an economy that is so big, it's almost too big to fail. We've heard those phrases before, and when they're used, they're spooky. Enron, Wall Street, the dark ages of the Great Depression. You know, like, if we don't do this, Great Depression. If we don't do that, Great Depression. If we don't do this, it'll sink. The military industrial complex is a big monster. And the only thing greater than having a corner on a market is controlling the demand. And there's a evil alliance between 10 companies and now the drug companies following that model. And our federal government that doesn't represent us almost at all. I think that's the worst outcome of World War II, is that we built a, you know, people say, oh, the Germans had better than us at everything. The Germans should have won the war. If the goddamn president, or if Hitler wasn't running Germany, Germany would have won the war against the entire planet. They had better everything. They had jets. we weren't anywhere near having jets. They had them flying and shooting. They were almost space aliens compared to everybody else. We were all in the 1920s.
I think they got overconfident. I think that's what you're saying about Hitler. He just thought he could do anything. When he invaded Russia, I mean, that was like
multiple wars, and they should have learned that. Yep. Like, if they just chose not to get into it with the communists, they would have won the war.
Yep.
And then they could have won, and then turned their nose and gone right to Russia second if they wanted to.
Yeah.
So, or conversely, hit the East and then take down the West. Hubris always before the fall, right? Of course, but I mean, by technological standards, they should have won. We built up an economy that overwhelmed them. You know, you've got a great FW-190. We're going to send 10 P-51s at you. Yeah, I know your airplane's better, but ours has straight wings. They're really quick, cheap, easy to make, and we can make them fast. We're going to just bury you. We buried them with supply chain.
It's the most boring thing.
It's fucking true. The most unelegant.
What won you the war? Supply chain.
Yeah, it's absolutely true.
You had Ford making jets.
That's right.
You know,
and if you look at, like, listen to what Napoleon, one of the greatest modern minds of military tactics, with more engagements and, you know, a lot of failures also. You know, he said, what moves an army, right? What did he say? Beans and boots, something like that. An army travels on its stomach and its boots. You got to be able to fucking feed them. We're supply chain masters. You know why we won World War II? UPS and FedEx and like all of these logistics.
Yeah.
So what's the greatest outcome of that? We have a country that has some core industries that are driven by something that the citizens don't need or consume.
And you know what else exploded during that time? Government agencies.
Yeah.
And that military industrial complex wasn't just corporations in the military, but it was government agencies that operated outside of the Constitution.
If you just have elected people, it's very hard to corrupt the government because they're temporary. But if you have these institutions, doesn't matter who's in charge, they're all compromised.
Yeah.
Well, they're there forever.
That's what I mean. So you can buy off a congressman, but then he gets unelected. You can buy off a senator, but then they get unelected.
Temporary.
And now you got to do it all again. And stockholders don't like that. They like predictability. So what you do is you support agencies that are there, and they're running the country, not our politicians.
Yeah, because we talked about as well. My man George, he decided, hey man, I've had enough. I'm done. I'm going back to the farm.
Yeah,
I did my time.
Yeah,
I set you guys up, and I'm going back to the farm. That's how politicians did it back then. 1-2 terms, back to my normal job. Next guy comes in, and now it's 40, 50 years. It's $160,000 salary, but
but they're
living in a
millionaires
gated
after.
community, and my stock portfolio.
Well, look at Ocasio-Cortez is worth $22 million right now.
Oh, isn't that from selling those shirts?
She's a
Eat the
fucking
Rich?
bartender. She's a bartender I actually hired one of her fellow bartenders to work for me for about a year. Look, all right. I want to tell you my take on things, and then I want to tell you some George Washington stories, because I think there's two things to look at. Like, everybody right now is searching for what the answer is, right? Or what's the meaning, or where's the future go? Right now, our country's in complete disarray because the illusion has been broken. And the Wizard of Oz has been standing behind the fucking curtain yelling the great and powerful Oz through a microphone at us since World War I or earlier. And we all have just collectively had the curtain pulled back. And the internet did it. And they can't put the genie back in the bottle, and they're trying to. They're going to do it by censoring firearms companies. They're going to censor knife companies. They're going to block everybody who does something that makes a man stand like that and say no. They're going to get rid of all of us as soon as they can. And if they can't get rid of us with legislation, which they can't, they'll do it with deleting our banking capabilities. I've had my money seized by PayPal, Apple Pay, fucking everybody doing too much business, and they just shut it down. And they seized the money for 6 months. You can't have this $50,000. Yeah, what? And nothing you can do about it. There's not even a human being to talk to. But the cat's out of the bag. Too many of us know that the whole thing is a fucking racket. Like, if you'd asked me 3 years ago, I would have told you, yep, we went to the moon. Abso-goddamn-lutely. I've met and talked to astronauts. 2, aliens don't exist. That's silly. If they did, we'd see them everywhere. 3, I could go through a list of things. Now I'm like, yes, the CIA killed John Kennedy. It's not a conspiracy theory. We know it for sure. They killed his brother Bobby. We know that for sure. We're pretty sure they killed Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah.
We're pretty sure they killed a whole bunch of other people. We know for a fact they entrapped Spiro Agnew and got rid of Richard M. Nixon so they could put a shill Gerald Ford in there who would do whatever they said. Some minor league congressman. I know they've done that because and why? We know because of the software that kind of was used to translate the Dead Sea Scrolls and kind of decipher those. And they've been using it on the redacted black marker lined out documents from CIA that have been out for years. Now we know enough of what's happened. We're like, oh, holy shit. Here's what happened. These guys who started Murder Inc. out of fucking Miami did the Bay of Pigs invasion, which happened because we had put missiles in Turkey. Brezhnev was talking to Kennedy about it. CIA full of all these World War II veterans wanted to get the Russians. How can we do that? Let's start a conflict down in Cuba. How do we do that? Biggest field office in America, Miami. Huge flotilla of civilian boats. All these expat Cubans with American passports. Set up an invasion to go into Cuba. Try to get approval from Kennedy. No, don't you do it. I don't want anything to do with that. We're not invading Cuba. We'll get us in a conflict with Russia. They start the whole thing. They say, how do we get this to happen? Put missiles in Turkey. Why is missiles in Turkey a big deal? Well, cut off the Bosphorus, Black Sea's cut off, only warm water port of the Russians. Crimea Peninsula of what is currently Ukraine. Like, almost started nuclear war over that. Why did they put missiles there? It was to corner the Russians. Why did the Russians send missiles to Cuba? Because we cornered the Russians. Like, we antagonized them. This is the thing I don't like Arabs for. They'll throw rocks at you until someone gives them permission to defend yourself at a post, and you shoot one of them, and the whole community blows up. Every guy there's got a scar on his face from getting hit by a rock. Did you figure at some point someone was going to defend themselves? We poked the Russians and poked the Russians and poked the Russians and antagonized them. It's not Americans. We don't know what's going on. You got to really peel back the layers of the onion. So right after World War II, hostile veterans populate the CIA. We antagonize them through the State Department at the Bosphorus. The Russians counter that because politicians got to do something to keep things equal. They got to respond.
Well, it's
what do you
tense
do?
over there too, man, in Russia.
What?
It's tense over there in Russia. I mean, they just got, well, their asses kicked by Germany, and the Cold War's going on. We just dropped a nuclear bomb in Japan. They're next. It's like they're on walking on eggshells right now. Of course they're going to defend themselves.
And 1 in 3 men died.
Insane amount of men died.
1 in 3 men.
65 million deaths.
You think about that.
65 million. That's a quarter of our country. It's insane.
People don't like, why are the Russians this way? Well, read a goddamn book. And 100 years before that, Napoleon did it. Almost on cue, 100 years. 1840s. So it's like we've got babies running the State Department with a mission that doesn't correlate to America, and they start all of this chain of events, which bring us to today. This thing in Russia and Crimea Peninsula and a warm water port being the lifeblood of really what is a superpower. As much as we poke fun and make fun of them, they're the real thing. Our country is broken. Our democracy is broken, and it has been for a long time.
Why did we insist that we wanted Ukraine and any other Eastern Bloc country in NATO?
Because neocons and globalists are antagonistic to Russia, and they can't let it go.
And they just can't. They just have to.
They have to, because they think winning is getting another country in NATO.
But we have thermonuclear weapons, 1,000 times what we dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Yeah. Do you think they really they of course understand what they're playing with, but why do they persist? Because one person, one crazy dude with a finger on a button will end everything.
It's because they are denizens of a permanent bureaucracy, and they can't back off what they've done before, or it admits their error. It's why we don't have peace in the Mideast. It's why their Abraham Accords were undermined. Can you imagine if Donald Trump had been elected the second time, or if the election... Okay, I can't even talk about 2020 because 2020 is so fucked up. It's unbelievable. It's a goddamn Chinese fire drill. But imagine Donald Trump was retained the White House in 2020. We were probably within 6 months of completely, with the Abraham Accords that he and Kushner had put together, we were within 6 months of completely turning the Middle East off as a hotspot. Isolating Iran completely. Isolating the Palestinian completely from their money. Like a 23 country accord to recognize Israel, and enough is enough already. That would have been a done deal. Here we are. Now we're in the middle of, we're teetering on the edge of major. It wouldn't take much for that to just blow up over there. You know how little it takes to start a war. The shot heard around the world at Bunker Hill. I mean, one bullet can get it going. Archduke Ferdinand in fucking Yugoslavia starts World War I. Yeah, right. One
of those little things.
Yeah. So, I mean, it doesn't take much to just blow up the whole thing. I mean, what happens if Iran, who's like, our current administration has been so lackadaisical because they're anti-Trump. The Iranians are very anti-Trump. Our administration has been lackadaisical because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And now we have cells of Iranians trying to kill Donald Trump here in the United States. I mean, that all came out a couple of weeks ago. That's an amazing revelation. What happens if they kill Donald Trump?
Well, that just so happens to be on my list to talk to you about.
What happens if Iran blows up a major federal building here? I'm just saying, that would get us... Weakness causes war, and that would get us into a war like that.
Do you think any war like that turns nuclear? Because Iran's got nukes, we got nukes. Everybody involved in this, Israel's got nukes.
I think the threat of nuclear war is what spooks everybody the most. I don't think it's the nuclear war part.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, just my take on it, I mean, who else is allied with Iran that we would have to really worry about?
Well, China and Russia will not go to war with us over Iran.
Right. So, but those would be their two. If you said right now, okay, who likes Iran? Well, probably North Korea, because they like that kind of goofy shit, and Russia and China are kind of playing by the same playbook. But I mean, I feel like Iran starts something, we just make it glass, just turn that whole thing into glass. Like they're not gonna. That's not going to be.
And I think they know that. The problem is they don't have enough of anything to get all of us. So they would get a city with some dirty nuclear half-ass bomb, and which would cause mayhem and be awful.
Yeah.
And then we would rain hell down and wipe out the country.
But I think they also know right now, current administration doesn't have the balls to
They won't do
wipe
shit
out the country.
Yeah, they won't do
They
shit.
know a guy like Donald Trump would go, oh, cool, man. And he says shit like, I got a bigger button than you, and I'll push it. Right now, Kamala, Joe, Joe doesn't even know where the button is.
Yeah.
And none of them have the balls to do, oh, well, what we're going to do is we're going to blow up a few factories here. No, dude. No, we need to go over there with hell and brimstone, you know?
I think that the people on the other side are never as bad as we get told. I don't want to go kill a bunch of Iranians. I don't think that should be something we do. I think the Iranians, I think there's been a lot of, how could we get along with a theocracy somehow? And I think we could. I think the first thing you do is isolate them and you bring them to their knees, and then you extend an olive branch and you go in and come up with a new way forward. The problem is we're half-assed. Our administrations are too short. No one's got the courage to go all the way. I think there are extremist factions in every country, and we have had extremist factions in this country running the country. Like, we have extremists right now. Anybody who would let what's going on in Ukraine and the Middle East happen, that's an extremist. They're just weak. They're extremely weak.
So I want to talk about Trump specifically, because I know you're a huge supporter of Trump.
Yeah.
And
since like 3 months before Ann Coulter was.
Ann Coulter.
My God, did you see the picture I sent you of him? Did I send it to you a couple days ago?
The one with you shaking his hand? Of course, yeah.
It's so fun.
You said he was here.
Yeah,
I mean, he was over at the arena.
Yeah.
Is that where you saw him?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think it's outside of anybody's idea of what could have happened now that he's been attempted assassination at least twice.
Yeah.
We've only got a couple weeks left till the election.
Yeah.
Maybe he makes it to the election. Let's say he wins the presidency.
Yeah.
Do you think he can survive?
Yeah.
You do?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me how.
I think that it's very hard to get him once they've got power. I think he's got no power right now, and he has a lot of power. I think once he's got the power back, I think it's spooky to come for him. I think the biggest enemies to Donald Trump are Democrats here in the United States. They're the biggest enemies. And I hate to say that because these are my countrymen, and I think they're wrong-headed. But it's not any longer over how much money we should spend on schools or how much money we should spend on bridges. It's not how much we should tax corporations. It's, do we believe that there are things called men, things called women? Do we believe there are things called citizens? Do we believe this is a country? Do we believe it is a place worth protecting? Do we believe in the foundation of Western civilization that there is a code of ethics and laws that we're all held account to? Do we believe in those things or not? And I think they're the enemy. And to say that is problematic because they think I'm the enemy. The only difference is they're not armed and they're not ready and they don't know what to do. They're just undermining us.
Can we ever mend that? Or are we too far gone?
I don't think we're too far gone. I think there's a sorting process. I think you've heard techie people say disruptor technology for years. And the disruption is really cultural. It's really political, and it's with the intelligentsia. I think I heard Elon Musk say something that dropped my jaw. He said he was talking about famous billionaires, and he named them that he knew. He named 2 of them who are scared of Trump being elected because the Epstein files will be released. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I actually don't think Elon Musk is. I think he's probably an exceedingly practical, obsessed man, or he wouldn't be able to be as successful. He's been in fucking 5 major endeavors. I think a lot of people are compromised by what's been going on the last 10 years in Hollywood and in Washington, D.C. I mean, I know people who've been to crazy sex parties in Washington, D.C.
I think it's like a rite of passage. Blackmail?
No, I think it's what happens when commoners have access to what feels like unlimited money and power and prestige. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's Rome.
It's almost like, well, what do we do now?
Look, I think I would be problematic in Washington with no accountability, a whole lot of money, and pussy everywhere coming at me. I'd be a problem.
That's why when you're...
and I'm a good dude, but I mean, I think I could be problematic.
It's like being a college basketball star and going into the NBA, and all of a sudden you go from broke to $10 million.
And we wonder what happens. These are regular guys who are like...
You just handed a high school kid $30 million. What do you think is going to happen?
Not going to happen.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen.
And so add power, add prestige, add rubbing up against, like, you know, I hang out with the president once a month. I mean, holy fuck. People lose their goddamn minds. Mm-hmm. I think one of the best things we could do, you know, we have a lot of problems with our democracy, okay? And the thing is, our democracy has to be alive and reactive. It has to react to what's going on, and it has to hold on to its core of who we are. We got to have wings, and we got to have roots. And what's the solution going forward? You know, I would propose that we level Washington and we make it a memorial park. I think the Capitol, but the federal, you know, the Capitol building should become a living museum. I think that all senators and congressmen should serve in their state house in their respective states. They should Zoom meet with each other. They should vote digitally. I think it would make it very hard to bribe them all to go from one office to the next colluding. I think it makes it very hard to have nudge, nudge, wink, wink arrangements. The sex parties go away. The mayhem goes away. The money goes away. And if Boeing wants to bribe, they got to do it in 50 states. And you got to do it in front of all of these state elected officials. I think they should all be here, and they should conduct their business in an open platform.
In a similar vein to what you're talking about, Ramaswamy is kind of suggesting that just get rid of all. I mean, there's going to be some ugliness. There's going to be some muscle cut along with the fat, but it's better than continuously just getting fatter and fatter in each department. So if you have to rebuild a department here and there, fine, but just the cut itself just needs to happen. I mean, that's kind of seems like where you're going.
Well, I you know, people have asked me like, hey, what would you do to like change the country? If you could like I would give up my life right now if I could make 3 changes. Okay. The first would be a 10-year sunset clause on all legislation. The second would be the constitutional amendment for a balanced budget. Those two things, and I would say, and I would do term limits on Congress as well. So sunset clause. Every law you pass, no matter what it is, it ends in 10 years. Because everything that we are constrained by, live by, and ruled by is an abomination of translating the Constitution. Every rule. And so let's say it's the semi-automatic, the assault weapons ban. Let's say they pull a rabbit out of their ass and they pull a ban. We all just hold our breath and go, okay, well, in 10 years, they got to renew it. And what happens a lot of times, here's what I think. Congress has got nothing to do. The country functions. The only thing they can do is fucking fuck with it. They're just fucking with, they're reacting to problems and making more problems. They don't actually run the country. So what we have is fuckery on top of fuckery on top of fuckery. Instead of every year they've got legislation they have to put skin in the game to renew. Imagine if every year congressmen had to vote on abortion. Every year they've got to vote on a national transportation bill. They have to. Or the laws go dead. They fall off the books. Federal speed limits falls off the books. National abortion bill falls off the books. Everything falls off in 10 years. That means our laws are always current. They're always just a decade old. There are no old laws we're stuck with. I think that would be really good. It would make our democracy alive and vibrant, and it would give our legislators real work to do. They would always be crafting, and hey, we got to get that transportation bill done. We got to get that Students Protection Act. We got to do that thing for the kids. They'd be doing real work.
Would that trickle over to the departments?
Well, the thing about the departments that's fascinating is like, you need a Defense Department. Do you need a Department of Education?
That's the stats show no.
The stats,
the states can take care of that.
That's right.
The public sector could probably take care of that.
That's exactly right. Do we need an FBI?
No.
No. Do we need a CIA?
Not the one we have. We need intelligence. I don't know if we need a CIA.
I think we need a CIA that is broken up. We can't have an action branch and an intel branch that are answerable to no one, and they're the same branch.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all unelected.
And
there's no one accountability. There's no accountability. So I think we should have an intelligence branch, and it's against the law for them to communicate with an action branch. And we have an action branch that is an arm of the U.S. military and has a code of ethics.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we went from, I'm going to call the CIA wars. That would be Korea and Vietnam. A CIA populated by World War II veterans, primarily, right?
Sure, yeah.
And then they decided, God, these wars cost a lot of money and a lot of blood, and the PR is awful. Why don't we let's just topple these governments instead of like overtaking them with the military? How do we do that? Well, we could be the beacon of democracy. We'll come oversee and audit their elections to make sure they have good elections. That's all CIA and State Department.
Propaganda.
What else can we do? Well, let's go in and help them with their PR so we get the people we want elected.
Yep.
Well, what else can we do? Well, we can put these voting machines in, and then we could put our thumb on the scale, which has been going on. We know at least 88 countries we've toppled their administrations and absolutely changed the outcome of free and clear elections in their country. And we're good at it. You can't even catch us. We don't even leave a fingerprint. How do we know? We did it in 2020 here. People want a smoking gun from this. If an assassin, a trained assassin, kills someone in your town, you aren't going to fucking know. You're just going to know they're missing. Something went wrong. They're dead. There's a bullet. Well, we know something happened in 2020. We can chalk it up and rationalize it to Orange Bad Man. That's what the left does. But there is a lot of implicating soft data pointing to.
Is the first election that I remember. I'm not that old, but the first election that I remember where they stopped counting in places. They just stopped counting.
There's so much anecdotally messed up about it.
We're watching it, and they're like, "Okay, we're done counting for the night." I'm like, "What the fuck? We don't know who won. What do you mean you're done counting for the night? What do you mean? What?"
And then you wake up and there's been counting going on.
And it goes like this.
Yeah, there's a lot. So I've seen some guys from the CIA do breakdowns of the voting analysis and the curves of stuff coming in. They know how to tell. And this is the thing that like people that aren't big data crunchers and a lot of folks that aren't like real educated or into this, they don't get. There are things like we can look at numbers as they come in and we know what's going on. And we know what it looks like when we cheat a country because we've done it so many times. We know how to manipulate elections. That's our specialty. We're probably better at that than war because it's cheaper to elect American-friendly governments than it is to fight bad ones. So I don't fault the CIA for making that decision. I don't think it's an awful decision. I just think the outcome, it's a genie you can't put back in the bottle, which is why France has gone to counting beads again. They don't use machines.
Yeah, I feel like it's, I think about the abortion discussion you and I had, like there's this freedom thing but there's this like there's a cost to this, right? Like, do we go in there? We know that it'll be cheaper and better potentially, like we believe it'll be better for the citizens of that country if we just put our thumb on the scale on the election. But what does that lead to? Like, they're difficult questions because if you can stand on one side and say, no, morally, we should not be doing that. Even though we know the outcome of that is going to kill, people are going to die because the person who's going to get elected, he's going to cheat, whatever. It's a tough decision because on one hand, morally, it's a problem. Like, it's like, I don't feel good about doing that. I don't feel good that we inserted ourselves into an election. On the other hand, you're like, well, but maybe we did help this country. Maybe we did.
We don't do it for them. That's what's wrong. We do it for us. And the other part is, just like everything else, this stuff all comes home to roost. You can only get away with this for so long. Why is it this amazing place is hated by so many people?
Well, one, they can see every wart that we have because we have a free media. Well, more free than anybody else.
It's not that at all. They see how America acts in their country.
We have something that they don't. People get jealous of that.
Right, but that was the same 50 years ago, and they loved us. We have always been a shining beacon on the hill since our inception. And to this day, we're the number one place the entire planet wants to go when polled by a margin of more than the next 10 countries combined. Okay? And we're still hated. Why so hated? It's not because we do well. It's not because of rock and roll.
Everybody's business.
It's not because of bikinis and fake titties. It is because straight up of us meddling in those countries and breaking the prime directive of Star Trek. It's because we go in and mess with stuff that's not our business.
Well, the problem with that too also comes in. It's like you said, okay, we're doing it for us, right? And then we get the issue of like the Bin Ladens. We're going to help him out because that served our interest against the Russians. So we're going to help him out, give him some weapons, some training. And then when he starts going, you know, man, I don't really like you guys either. Oh shit. Okay, we got to get this guy out of here.
Yep.
And then it's just continual. Like we place the puppet. The puppet starts to see some other things to go, you know what, screw you guys. Now we got to take that guy out and just put the next guy in. It's just this continuous cycle of having to put somebody in that's going to be friendly to us.
Well, this is globalism, right? So some country wants to make money in Nigeria, so now we have to make a pact with the devil. Okay? Don't do business in Nigeria. No pacts. Let the cards fall where they will. Let them self-determine. You know, we break our own core principle in everything we do. Let them self-determine. Well, they can't do it. And you know what it is? A lot of it's racism. They can't handle it. They've decided they can't, for whatever it is. But I mean, outwardly, it looks like racism to me.
I literally just heard that. I was reading about what's going on, a little bit about Ukraine and Russia. And I have no idea. I was so surprised to hear this. But these journalists who are talking about, this anti-Russia stance and Russia's invaded them, and all this, they say it's racism.
Yeah, so the
I don't even understand what they mean by that.
So the races, you mean not against Russians? I mean, so the Ukrainians have been rounding up Russians and doing shit to them. Like, you know this, right?
Yeah.
They'll kill you for speaking Russian.
Yes. Oh, yeah. They made it illegal.
In an ethnic Russian province that has always been inhabited by Russia. So Ukraine's gone out of its mind. Like, we forget, like, Zelensky ran. Nobody ever thought he was going to get elected. Because like Donald Trump running for president. Zelensky ran on a platform of reconciliation with Russia. Yep. And I can't remember if it was called the Donbass Accords. I don't want to say this quite wrong, but I think it was like France and Germany and Russia had put together this proposition. And Zelensky had adopted the proposition as his part of his plank. And when I get elected, what we're going to do is we're going to make Crimea, and I think it was Donbass or the area right above it. I'm that stuff's a little jumbled in my head. We're going to make these two areas semi-autonomous Russian republics of Ukraine. So they're economically Ukrainian and they are ethnically Russian. He ran on that and he got elected. Everybody in Ukraine knew this was coming. Russia knew this was coming. And the Biden administration stepped in immediately and said, no, you're not doing this. Now, I don't know why, the Bidens have been very involved in what's going on in Ukraine. There's been a lot of money that's changed hands. I don't know behind the scenes everything that's going on. I don't know about like the 15 bioweapon research facilities we had in Ukraine doing research for the United States that's illegal. I don't know much about that stuff. But for some reason, we basically came in and told Zelensky it ain't happening.
And he just keeps his mouth shut. He's never gone back against that.
He's corrupt.
All that money, man.
He's corrupt.
Wasn't his wife's driving like a $4 million car?
Well, him and everybody else.
That is the most. Ukraine is one of the most corrupt places on planet Earth. Has been forever. And we have made a deal with the devil getting in with these sons of bitches. You should have let it be Russia. Fuck Ukraine. You know what happened? No. If we hadn't backed them, that whole thing would have been a beer fart and a windstorm. It would have been over in no time. It would have been Russian, fine. And Russia, they deserve a warm water port. They got a lot of nukes. They've had it since Catherine the fucking Great. And they've been invaded like 3 or 4 times over the centuries, right through the Ukrainian region of Russia. Which should still be Russia. Fuck them. And fuck the Ukrainians. You don't like me for saying it. Jeez, you guys are out of your fucking minds.
Well, you're not going to win that war. I don't care how bad you want to. You have no other way to go than negotiate. Otherwise, you're going to lose most of your male population. And that's what they've done. And Russia has 100 million more people there.
You know, it's funny. We get caught up in the semantics of the conflict, but let's back up right before the conflict. We have a real global superpower that has plenty of money, which is Russia. Russia's got plenty of fucking money. Why? Because we didn't approve the Keystone Pipeline. We drove up global prices on oil. We've allowed conflict in the Middle East to foment. And so what happens in what is essentially a petrochemical welfare state is Putin and the oligarchs who own the oil business over there. What's oil trading at right now? Chris, do you know? Can you Google it? What oil's trading for right now? I've heard somewhere along the lines they need something like $50 a barrel to break even for their social services inside the country. Saudi Arabia is very similar. What's it trading at right now, Chris? So every dollar above like $50 a barrel, and I may be off a little bit, so like I don't want anyone to crucify me over it, but it's 73.5. So it's 73.5. They make like $25 a barrel of profit, which allows you to give a bunch of missiles to the Palestinians. It allows you to have money to buy weapons from China and invade Ukraine. Now, if you step back, let's say Canada was going to get into a scrap with the United States over the Great Lakes. It's what we're talking about. It's like that, right? Or
it's probably worse than that.
It's worse.
I mean, Canada's way better off than Ukraine.
It's worse.
And we're more powerful than Russia. I mean, it'd be worse than that.
So you're telling a superpower with a global naval fleet, we're going to cut off your only warm water port.
Yeah.
Okay. Russia's warm water, like people don't understand. Like, imagine if we didn't have Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Houston, Galveston, New Orleans, Miami, Norfolk. I mean, Boston, New York, New Jersey. We have these epic warm water ports everywhere. They have one.
And they're huge. Their landmass is huge compared to ours.
And they have one.
One.
And you think about
I'm trying to think.
It's their only one. They have the northern one.
They have the
for
northern
the
one. But that water, is that even connected to it's a sea, isn't it? The sea of
Are you talking about the northern one?
No, I'm talking about the southern one, the one you're talking about, right?
That goes into the Black Sea, and then has to go through the Bosphorus at Constantinople to get out into the Mediterranean.
Okay.
But that's why the missiles, before the Cuban Missile Crisis, right after World War II, we put missiles in Turkey.
Yep.
Why is that a big deal? Because we can shut down the Bosphorus, which is the passage out of the Black Sea into the Mediterranean. So the Russians, to have a warm water fleet that functions during the winter, they have to go through the Black Sea, the Bosphorus, a little tiny narrow channel, which you could sit there and drink Turkish coffee and smoke cigarettes at and watch. You could see the other side. They have to go through the Bosphorus to get into the Mediterranean to go either down south through what's the Arabian Sea there and get out into the Indian Ocean, or head out of the Mediterranean and get to the Atlantic. Like, we just have the ocean everywhere.
Yeah, I don't think Americans understand that.
No.
I don't think we have any idea.
That's why I'm like, they have no idea. They have a Chutes and Ladders Rube Goldberg to get their fucking to get their fleet to the ocean. It's like the mouse runs down here and winds up a thing, and a butterfly falls, and a bearing goes through those hoops and ladders. That's how the Russians get to see half the year. And so Ukraine says, and then we support them shutting that off. That is an existential threat to them.
Yeah.
It's like, you just say, was it who thought this was a good idea to support that? Who was going to let that happen? Nobody. So, what else do you want to talk about?
I was having fun talking about that.
I love that the close of World War II connects to the State Department putting missiles in Turkey to lock up the Bosphorus, that small opening of the Black Sea into the Mediterranean, which gets Brezhnev, who's become friends with Kennedy through a hotline, to send missiles to Cuba, which starts an argument between the CIA and Kennedy, because the CIA wants to start a conflict in Cuba to suck us into a conflict with Russia to finish the war that MacArthur wanted to have. And Patton. Those soldiers who were part of that group then do the Bay of Pigs invasion against presidential decree to force a conflict, knowing they will either win, which they knew they wouldn't, or they'll have to call in the Marines to rescue passport-holding American citizens, which are Cuban expats, held prison in Cuba. They pull off an invasion of another country with civilian equipment, expat soldiers carrying American passports against presidential decree. Do you think they had the backing of the State Department? You think they had the backing of the CIA? You think they had yes, they had the backing of everybody. The president said no. They're going to suck him into it because they knew he was going to have to send the Marines in. They talked to him, and Kennedy says, no. I told you no, it's not happening. Deal with your people down there. And within months, he's shot dead.
Yeah, after the people were already
by
there.
the two guys out of this Miami field office who founded Murder Incorporated for Vietnam in 1964, and Lee Harvey Oswald.
I think when history looks back on this, I think we're still living in this World War II era. I don't think we're out of it.
We're
I
not
think
out of it. It is absolutely connected to fucking today.
I mean, Cold War after World War II, which is, I mean, it was obvious that was going to happen. And then we're still in this weird Cold War-ish time. I mean, this nuclear age that we're in, I just think when history looks back, we're still in this era.
Yeah. But like, I hear everybody talk about everything, and I just tell that little tale right there from World War II up to the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And you see what they pulled off, and you know now that they did it. You see him do it to Nixon, the most popularly elected president in American history ever.
That's right.
Then you see him do
and
it.
Now he's the butt of every presidential joke.
And now you see him do it to Trump. They did it to Trump. They mustered him out of office. The CIA has confidence scams going. Jeffrey Epstein was part of the deal. This is all connected. And people, it's just people who don't want to admit this, they don't want to open their brain up. You know, this is from Plato's Republic, the allegory of the cave. If you ever read Plato, Plato writes this book called The Republic, and in it there are these anecdotes. He talks about the levels of learning and harmonics and resonance, mathematics and music, to make the complete man, the Superman, which Nietzsche reflected on later as the Übermensch, the Superman. He talked about the things, the ages you should be at certain levels of development. Our founding fathers were neoclassicists. They had all read Plato's Republic. The allegory of the cave, Plato writes, he says, humanity is sitting in a cave of darkness, staring at the walls of the cave. And behind us all is a fire. And there's this thing moving, and it has these little objects on it. And that fire casts a shadow upon the cave wall, flickering in the firelight. We see the shadows of things. And that is what most people see as reality. Out of every so many people, some people turn and look and let their eyes adjust to the bright light behind them, and they see, God, that's not reality. Those are just shapes on a conveyor belt. That's not real. And every now and then, one of them gets up and says, where's that light coming from? And walks up out of the cave. And most of them, blinded by the light, stick their head back in the cave, go take their place, facing the shadows and images flickering on the wall. Every now and then, one of them will go through the pain of the light, the brightness of it, the adjustment that it takes to get focus and look at light and see reality. And it's a painful, hard process most people don't want to do. That's what's going on in our culture. That's what's happening right now. We have been awakened.
Are you saying that's Trump?
I'm saying it's the internet. I'm saying it's internet reporting. I say it's the death of mainstream media. It's the death of the information oligarchs. I think that Trump is a response to that. He is in the ilk of Teddy Roosevelt. He is someone who will say the truth out loud.
Do you think history will give him his due?
Yes. I think he will, as soon as the impassioned haters of the generation They don't actually hate Trump. They hate their bubble being burst. He's telling them the truth. They hate us for telling them the truth. This is the person who gets up on their therapist and walks out because they don't like what their therapist has said. Everyone who is a psychologist, therapist, or psychiatrist had a patient quit them for telling them a truth they don't want to hear. How many people want to hear everything you've ever heard is a lie?
Nobody does.
Nobody does.
Just like looking at yourself deeply. No one wants to really understand what's deep.
That's why I made the analogy. And it's fucking painful and it's maddening. And you think you are in this honest, wonderful place, and you're not.
Yeah.
Now, the best part is we know. Before it was just this conspiracy theory.
COVID ripped it all off.
Yes, because we got to watch them lie to us bold-faced.
Yeah.
The problem right now is that there's still, you do have people that went, through COVID like, oh man, that's crazy. I can't believe that, man, they got us. And then you have people that go, what are you talking about?
Still wearing 2 masks.
They still believe, that
it's a diminishing, it's a diminishing cohort.
But like all of the misinformation and all of the shit people were getting flagged for and taken off the internet for is now in medical journals.
It's great. It's great that we've seen
thing is actually a thing. Yeah.
You know what changes veterans is we get to see something firsthand. Veterans come back and are considered the greatest source of domestic terrorism in the country. Like, that. Veterans are considered the number one class of potential terrorists in the country. Why? We're trained. 2, we've seen it. 3, we fucking know. And literally, we're a half a bottle of tequila and a divorce away from fucking shit up anyways. 3/4 of us are batshit crazy in the first place. So we're a scary bunch for them because we've seen it from the outside. And when you talk to CIA people behind the screen with just the profile of them and them telling you what's happened, and you read redacted documents and all of this, when you see disaffected people from marginal communities like veteran communities or the CIA community, which is very small, you can kind of shrug. But now everybody's been a part of a thing. CIA guys know it's bullshit because they've been a part of some scam that they pulled off for our government. Veterans know because we've been part of some scam that pulled off some bullshit war and did some bullshit stuff and saw truckloads of money going into an Arab's car and off into the desert. We've seen the madness of it. My dad worked his whole life fucking swinging a hammer and then be a psychologist getting paid by the hour, and that dude just got a Hilux backload full of $100 bills. The fuck is wrong with the world? All a veteran's got to do is see that once and be like, okay, this is broken.
Yeah.
And then that kid's son-in-law kills one of your buddies, in the little village that you're protecting. So the big thing about COVID is everybody got to be a firsthand witness to the skullduggery. The best thing they should have done is let it play out. Like, you want to stay in charge? Just let it play out. But to do what they did, now we all know. And I had a good inkling before. I mean, the shit that I believed 3 years ago that I don't believe now is unbelievable.
I think everybody thinks that exact comment is true. Like, I believed that the pharmaceuticals companies were on our side. I didn't think we had a health crisis. I mean, all of that stuff is just wide open right now. It's crazy clear.
Because we got to see. They've been doing this. And we got to see them do this.
Nobody was talking about vaccines. Yeah. Nobody was talking about vaccines before COVID. Now we're like, holy cow, these are one of the worst things probably in our whole culture. They've pulled this scam off for 50 years.
Well, here's the thing. So, all right, look, you and I and the 3 of us, we've not had to grow up with lots of kids with leg braces because of polio. We've not had to see friends of ours go blind from measles. Your dad did. My parents everybody had kids with braces on their legs like Forrest Gump from polio. So the vaccine technology that we came up with is really, really good. But this is not a vaccine, this stuff. This is mRNA enhanced, mitochondrial altering, DNA changing shit. And it's really cool technology. It's a thing that you can put a protein inside of that will fix anything. We just aren't ready. It wasn't ready for prime time.
Well, it's the medical industrial complex at work, because 100 years ago they were doing good, honest things. Penicillin and the vaccine for polio, those were great things. They saved lives. Now they have to keep their shareholders happy. That's why there's 78 vaccines on the children's docket right? Instead of 3 back when you and I were kids.
Yeah, and I actually think a lot of what they do is good. And because drugs are fucking amazing and what they're able to do is amazing. And there's a really, really bright people. I think when it gets to public policy and big broad strokes, they get okay killing 100 million people. Like anytime a couple people can decide it's okay to kill 100 million people, like they're saying right now, the vaccines killed 20 million people, 18, 20 million, something like that order of magnitude. Somebody decided it was okay. They knew that. Now, they knew it was going to kill a bunch of people when they invented the technology 12 years before COVID and put it on a shelf because they knew it would never get first-level testing approval because of what it does to the mRNA, the mitochondrial DNA. So that thing had been shelved for years, and the technology's not quite there. What happened, though, is Anthony Fauci and the National Institute of Health and the World Health Organization, these globalist cockbags, they decided they scared the shit out of everybody. Said it could be as high as 1 in 10 people die from this. When you hear that number, you got to remember one of Trump's big early things he did was that right to try bill that passed so that people who have terminal cancer can try experimental drugs. That zeitgeist of, hey, we got a right to try. When they're saying 1 in 10 people's going to die, you start getting really flexible about, well, okay. And then what was interesting is the drug company said, we don't have anything. And he said, you got to have something. So, well, I got this thing, but we're not going to put it out there. It would never pass. Why not? It'll kill some people. Yeah, but we're talking about losing 1 in 10 people. That's 33 million people in the United States. We don't have a place to bury that many people. And so they go, well, if you want this, we'll kind of rig it up. We can jury rig it up. It's going to be problematic, but the only way we'll release it is if we get absolute immunity. Like, that's what happened. It was not bad intentioned. They weren't Machiavellian. Once the decision was made, though, it was the National Institute of Health. It was the World Health Organization. These people who used it as a hammer to govern us. That's where it went wrong. That private group, the private company that came up with it, they knew it wasn't. They demanded because they knew there was going to be a problem with it. The fact that they required immunity to release it, we all should have known not to take it. Like I knew not to take it. And the people older than us, like our parents' age, an astounding amount of conservatives took it because they believe the government. Yeah. And they remember when Dan Rather used to just give them the news, folks. That's the news tonight. Well, it hasn't been the case.
But also, we've always just trusted that institution.
Gone.
Always.
Gone.
It's gone now.
Yeah.
And it's my opinion, burn it to the fucking ground. They put a park there.
Yeah.
Can we talk about aliens? Because I am off the cliff on aliens.
What do we got? We've got, what, 5 minutes?
We're out of
maybe?
time. We're out of time.
Let's do a 5 minute, let's do a flash
5 minute
round,
speed
5
round
minute
on
speed
aliens.
round
On
for
aliens.
aliens. All right, go.
Okay. Have you guys been listening to this alien stuff at all?
Dude, only since I started listening to alien stuff in 1993 when X-Files started. So,
okay.
Dude, yeah.
Okay. I'm in the middle of the Tales of Gilgamesh right now, and I'm reading the fucking Jade Tablets. I mean, like, I'm off the goddamn rockers on this shit. So, everything that archaeology has told us is like it's all coming out. It's a lie. They're completely wrong about everything. Like the Egyptians building the fucking pyramids, Atlantis, fucking ice shelf, all this stuff, the Younger Dryas period, comet impacts, the ice shelf, the ice age, global warming. I mean, everything's not what anyone has said. Everything's bullshit. I don't know what to believe anymore.
So you were a aliens don't exist guy.
Yeah.
Now you're...
Well, no, okay. So I was a Carl Sagan guy. So,
yeah.
Like, there are a trillion galaxies as big or some 600 times bigger than the Milky Way. The Milky Way is 120,000 light years across. It is a small fledgling galaxy. There are a trillion galaxies, many of whom as much as 600 times greater than ours.
Is that like a terabyte or a tetrabyte?
It's a fucking metric shit ton is what it is. Each one of those galaxies has 1 trillion stars or more, or 600 trillion. And each one of those, almost every star we look at has planets around it. What are the odds we're the only life? The odds are 0. The difference is there's just huge space between us all, right? So it's hard to reach it. We don't live that long. These are big periods of time. I'm freaked out by like videos I've been watching of naval intercepts of these craft popping up, being intercepted by fighter pilots. And the stuff that's called
Tic Tac and
well, not just that one, but these ones that look like flying saucers that are flying next to aircraft, and then they're 60 miles away in 1 second, showing some sort of hyper bending of space or whatever time. I'm not freaked out by any of it. I'm blown away by how much of it there is.
Have you read anything about Bob Lazar's and his theory?
Yes.
That's actually pretty crazy about how that type of travel could be possible.
Yes, this Ravitic.
You're basically going in a way. You're going outside of space and time. You're not affected by gravity. And I don't know all the details about it, but basically, the reason why you see these craft that can go left and right, and like they make 90-degree turns and nobody inside them is hurt or whatever, is because they actually bypass space as we know it in some form.
It's because they don't accelerate through our plane of gravity. They make their own gravitational plane. It's this Ravitic technology. Is these 3 gravitational? They're able to make their own gravity. It's interesting. With all of our knowledge about all the things that we think we know about, we have no idea what gravity is. It is the number one thing that affects us every single day. Breathing, heartbeat, getting up, sitting down, going to the bathroom. We don't even know what gravity is.
This should be a wake up for everybody who thinks science is like, they claim science as absolute. It's like, dude, explain to me, what is gravity? We know how to calculate gravity. We have no idea why it's there. So yeah, to your point, I agree.
and so there's clearly something. We're going to find out that what we call every time we learn to look better, we see more. Right? We thought we were the geocentric. We thought we were the center until we learned to look better. And then we found out the sun was the center. Until we learned how to look and measure better. And then we found out there was this. Then we learned how to look and measure better. Then we found out there's this macro. And then we learned how to look smaller. And when I was a kid, the smallest thing was an electron. Now electrons are, there's quarks and neutrinos and all of this other stuff. And now they're talking about smaller than that, a string particle. And that must be made up of something. I mean, as we look smaller, there will be more. They're going to find out that light actually has mass. It's not a zero mass. And it moves through something, not nothing. And that nothing can move through nothing. We just can't see it yet. So they call it nothing. But we're going to find out the better we look. Because, nothing when they make it to the macro works all the way. And nothing when we make it to the micro works all the way. So there's something we can't see.
Well, that's
they call it dark matter.
That's right.
So they make up something. Well, there must be. Well, we just can't see it yet.
Well, and I think that is the arrogance of science, is that we assume that what we know right now is like this gospel, but it's really, we're such babies. And we've always learned more. I think there was a quote from around 1900, right before quantum physics was discovered at its full depth. There was this physicist, and I don't remember his name, but he said in this famous conference that we have learned everything about physics that we need to have learned. There's nothing left to discover. Right. And the next thing you know, within a few years, Einstein was doing his thing. Quantum physics was discovered. Special and general relativity was discovered. And a whole new explosion of physics was discovered. So I think when we look back, who knows how long we're going to be around here, but we look back, we will realize how little we actually knew in science at this point in time.
We have a snapshot at any given time, we have a snapshot of knowledge. And the worst thing for us is academia and the arrogance of academia because they think they know something. Here's the 2 scariest things I've heard in probably my lifetime. Here are the 2 scariest things. Is Donald Trump being asked if he was been read in on aliens and him saying, yes, and you don't want to know, and I don't want to know anymore. That's the first. That's fucking scary. And Tucker Carlson, who I consider a guy who's a master of expose. He's He's smarmy. He's a frat boy. He's got a whiny, high-pitched voice. I find him semi-effeminate. He annoys me at a lot of different levels. Same with Ben Shapiro. Arbiters of expose and truth. I like them both. And the guy said, I have had two very high-level, very knowledgeable guys basically read me in on our alien program, and I told him to stop. I can't know anymore. I don't want to know anymore. I can't function. He goes, I'm a Christian. I can't function like this. And said, that's enough. He put his blinders up. So that's too much.
What do you think the end goal, like aliens coming here, what do they, like, we're so non-advanced, what do they need from us? Or why haven't they killed us yet? Or why, like, what do you think they're just coming here checking it out going, oh, these guys are fucking retards, we're going to split? Or like,
I guess there's, my brain's trying to wrap around what a simulation is, and are we a simulation? Not totally sure what that means, but we're the product. Just like the internet, we are the product. They're not there selling us stuff. They're there selling us. I think we're the product. So it'll be interesting to see, are they waiting for enough of us? Do they use us for stuff? Do organisms, in the same way that they've got these telomere spacings in DNA that make us not able to infinitely replicate, and therefore we have a 120-year kind of life cycle and our DNA kind of dies? Does a species have the same thing? Do species around the universe, are they more connected than we think because they've been around much longer than us, right? So the planet, the universe is like, what, like, is like 8 billion years old, or 8.2 billion?
I think it's 13 or 14, 13, somewhere between 13.
So some number, let's say just 10 billion, and Earth's been here like 6 billion, 8 billion?
4.5.
4.5? So Earth's been here half the time of the universe.
Well, a third.
Okay, a third the time of the universe. And the first billion years, they say, was nothing, just based on tracking DNA. Then the next billion, there was a single cell life form. And in a very, very short time, we've popped up. If we take them reasonable, some semblance of accuracy. Let's say they're off by a bunch and we've been around a billion years. Somebody's been around 2 billion. And what could a species do in a billion? And we only have collective record of us being around for a couple thousand years. Really.
But we weren't, there's so much to think about, but we started from a single cell, let's just say evolution, right? It's taken us so long to get to be a intelligent being, and within such a short amount of time, we're going to annihilate ourselves. That's the way I look at it. You know, so this long development process of human life to get to be intelligent, and then all of a sudden we're so intelligent, we make these crazy bombs, and we're just going to annihilate ourselves.
It's even more fascinating, and actually, in the epoch of life, intelligent life the layer is semi-opaque, one cell thick at the end. It's billions of years of not intelligent. Right. You know, it's billions of years. It was a billion years of a single cell before it turned to our first multi-cell organism. It took billions of years to get to a mammal. And this upright chatting thing, if you believe in that evolution, and I'm not sure now if I believe in that anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe it's some factor to a bigger, layered on top of a bigger thing. But intelligent life hasn't been here that long.
And
when you say 30,000 years, it's nothing.
It's not long.
So we've been really intelligent in our current iteration. Maybe there was a pre-existing really great stone species before us that was interplanetary, but like our current iteration, we've gotten really smart in a few thousand years. Imagine imagine where will we be if we survive in 10,000 years?
Well, right now, phone, computer, whatever technology is doubling. You get a brand new iPhone 6 months later, it's a piece of shit.
So where will we be in 10,000 years? And okay, what are the odds we're the only one in the universe? 0. There is 0 odds we're the only one in the universe. Okay, it's impossible because there are more planets than we can count or imagine.
I just think we just kill ourselves before we get to the point where we have the technology where we can fly across the universe and meet anybody else.
Somebody's 10,000 years older than us.
I don't think so. How do we get out?
So you're saying all species self-destruct?
Yes.
And that's one possibility.
I really believe that. I don't know how we don't self-destruct, and I don't know how other species are much different than us, given the unique little tiny pinhole we've had to go through thousands of times to keep life going to get to us.
I think we adapt when we have to.
I think, yes.
I think our impotence for survival will be great.
If I had to guess, though, the way evolution is supposed to work, it's just a bunch of us's on these other planets. I don't want to get too long-winded on this because I have a whole theory behind it, but I think it's a bunch of us's on all these other planets, and we can't live very long because we kill ourselves. Because once we develop technology, where does that technology go? We use it in weapons. Humans, and I think all other life, is the same. We're creatures of war, and we're creatures of battles, and we're creatures of that's our upbringing. That's where we came from. If we talk about evolution, not very long ago, we were killing other animals for food.
So there's never been a more peaceful 50 years in human existence than there has been. This is the most peaceful 50 years that's ever happened.
Storm.
Well, it may be as we become emasculated and there are more and more rules and it's more effeminized and it's more relative and men are less important and guns are less important and knives are less important. Military culture and a military class of fighting age men is less important. It's becoming less and less important. We may be succeeding ourselves out of existence.
Yeah.
And what will survive is a big head, small mouth, light framed, no muscle, pot belly, short because big doesn't matter. Don't have to carry guns. Giant head because brains are what matters. That may be where we're headed. If you think, there's some.
We did a lot better when we had littler brains.
I don't know if we did better.
Yeah. Well, we survived. I think we survived longer.
No.
We survived into this, and I think this is what kills us.
We
our
bred
brains.
into this.
Well, yeah, but we survived. We've carried on.
I think we're going to continue to have bigger and bigger heads and smaller jaws, and I think it'll be harder and harder to give natural birth.
Like the green guy that we always see when they say alien.
Yeah, and it's
Giant head, little body.
Yeah, the gray aliens. Yeah, those guys. So they have no genitals. They have black eyes because they don't need to. There's no sun in space.
It's really interesting. Like, I know you go to church on Sundays, and we have probably diametrically opposed worldviews from that regard. But what I've seen coming out now, like, okay, let's say there are little green men and aliens. It doesn't mean there's not a God. So that's not a big conflict for me.
Yeah.
But it also means that our origin story could be very, very different than the kooky book that everybody reads.
We're getting out of time, but we should have you come back. I have a lot of thoughts about this.
I am balls deep into the Anunnaki and the jade tablets right now, man.
Yeah, dude.
So, anyways,
that'll definitely be the next topic when you.
If you want to ask me the earlier question you said was like, how has World War II affected us? I think we see this chain of events that's brought us out of our innocence and into our skeptical adult. And we're in our skeptical adult phase right now. And we're coming to terms with being knowledgeable. All of the knowledge they've kept from us for over the centuries because they thought it was too much for us to all know. Now we all have that, and we're trying to wrestle with it and process it and figure it out. And I can't tell if the alien thing is the biggest CIA counterintelligence thing that's ever happened to basically be going at the Russians to make them spend money on technology they think we have, or if we've been held back by the greatest secret of mankind, and the guys who are in the know, read in, are so spooked by it. They're presidents and global figures that are afraid to talk about it. And that is scary to me.
Either way, either possibility, it's the biggest story of our time. Either way.
It's the biggest story of our time.
Or did the aliens plant the CIA? Holy shit.
You know what? It's the funny thing is, it's the biggest story of our time. And when you mention it, people kind of chuckle like you're some tinfoil wearing goon. And the thing is, like, most of the guys I know are into this, they're the sentinels of our republic. These are fighter pilots. I mean, I have one of my very dear friends who is a leader at one of our mutual friends' companies, who was flying a jet right next to the Phoenix Lights when they showed up, and has a firsthand account of it. And they used him in the documentary about it. And he got himself behind a screen and had him muffle his voice. And I know him personally, and he's a squared away dude.
Well, it's not 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, it was super taboo. It is becoming more and more mainstream now. Guys like Joe Rogan, that some of the big names are
It's
okay.
like pot.
I think that New York,
It's like marijuana.
that's true. That's very true.
Aliens and marijuana are tracking together.
Maybe they brought, light goes off. Ding. All right, dude, we got to go.
Okay.
But we should have you back for sure, because there's so
anytime.
much more to talk about. We just hit the tip of the iceberg on the aliens. Dude.
I love talking. I love talking about the universe and life and politics, geopolitics, and our place in it, because I'm pretty existential. I kind of chew on this shit all the time.
Yeah, it's good. Well, Greg, thanks for having you, buddy.
Hey, can I make a plug for myself?
Sure, absolutely.
God, guys, gotta go check out Medford Knife and Tool, my new company, Main Street Knives. I got my $200 American-made pocket knife, which is spectacular. You can also find me on YouTube at medfordknife.com, and you can find me on iTunes and Spotify, Greg Medford Show.
Sounds good, dude.
Thanks for letting me make a plug.
Absolutely.
I always forget to cock a leg and be a whore for myself. All right,
All
cool.
right, bud. Thanks.
Thanks.
Right on.